The night had that kind of cold that settles into your bones and refuses to leave. The city looked quiet from a distance, but up close it breathed with worry, narrow streets whispering stories no one wanted to hear out loud. I remember thinking that this was the kind of night where lives quietly changed without anyone noticing. She stood at the edge of the old district, holding her baby tighter than her arms could manage. Her coat was too thin, her hands trembling, not only from the cold but from the choice pressing down on her chest. She had been told there was no room for her anymore, no patience, no mercy. The words still rang in her ears as if they had been carved there. Leave the child or lose everything. The baby slept, unaware of the weight of the moment. A small breath rose and fell against her collarbone, warm and trusting. That trust broke her heart more than fear ever could. She had spent nights promising she would protect this child from the world. Now the world was demanding payment she could not afford. She did not notice the man watching from across the street. The Vampire King had walked these streets for centuries, unseen, unbothered, untouched by human suffering. Or at least that was the story people told. Power had made him distant, silence had made him unreadable. He wore darkness like a second skin, moving through the night as if it belonged to him. Yet something about the girl stopped him mid-step. He sensed her before he saw her. Not fear, not blood, but grief. Deep, quiet grief that had nowhere left to go. It brushed against him like a memory he had buried long ago, back when his own heart had still known how to ache. He stayed in the shadows, watching. The way she swayed gently as if movement alone could protect the child. The way her eyes kept lifting toward the abandoned building ahead, the place she had been told to leave the baby. A place with no warmth, no love, only walls and rules. She whispered apologies the baby could not understand. Each word felt like a betrayal. Her legs felt heavy as stone when she finally stepped forward. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but desperation has a way of stealing even that. The Vampire King felt something crack inside him. He had ruled with control, not kindness. His mercy had been calculated, rare, measured. Yet as the girl reached the door, her hand shaking as it hovered over the handle, he felt the old hunger rise. Not the hunger for blood, but for justice, for balance, for the chance to interrupt cruelty before it finished its work. Oh, he stepped into the light. She froze when she saw him, tall, pale, impossibly calm. His presence filled the narrow street without effort. Fear flashed across her face, sharp and honest. She pulled the baby closer, instinctively turning her body into a shield. "I won't hurt you," he said, his voice low, steady, carrying a strange warmth for someone so feared. She did not answer, she could not. The world had already taken too much from her to trust another stranger, especially one who looked like a living myth. The baby stirred, letting out a small sound that cut through the silence. The Vampire King's eyes softened at once. He took a step closer, slow, deliberate, giving her time to run if she chose to. "You don't want to do this," he said gently, nodding toward the door behind her. Tears finally broke free, tracing quiet lines down her face. "I don't have a choice," she whispered. "They said this is the only way." He looked at her then, really looked. The exhaustion in her posture, the courage it took to still be standing, the love that refused to leave her arms even when everything else had been stripped away. "Forced choices are the favorite weapon of cruel people," he said. "They call it order, it is nothing but fear." She shook her head, despair tightening her voice. "You don't understand. If I don't leave my baby, they will make sure neither of us survives." The words landed heavier than any threat. The street felt smaller. The night seemed to hold its breath. The Vampire King knew the truth of her fear. He could hear the lies hidden behind official words. He could smell the rot of systems built to break the weak. And for the first time in decades, he felt anger burn hot and personal. He reached into his coat and she flinched, ready to scream, ready to fight with everything she had left. Instead, he opened his hand slowly, showing it was empty. "Look at me," he said softly. "Oh, against her better judgment, she did." "You will not leave your child tonight," he continued. "Not here, not anywhere." Her hope rose too fast, dangerous and fragile. "You can't promise that," she said. "No one can." His gaze never wavered. I can. She searched his face for deception, for madness, for cruelty. She found none of it, only resolve, the kind that does not beg to be believed. Footsteps echoed at the far end of the street. Voices followed. The people who had given her the ultimatum were coming to make sure she obeyed. Her body tensed, panic returning full force. She clutched the baby, torn between running and collapsing. The vampire king turned toward the sound, his expression changing, becoming something ancient and unmovable. "Stand behind me," he said. She hesitated, torn between fear of him and fear of what was coming. The footsteps grew closer. And in that moment, with the child's fate hanging in the cold air, she had to decide whether to trust the monster everyone feared or surrender her baby to a world that had already proven it had no mercy. The footsteps stopped just a few paces away, close enough for their shadows to stretch across the cracked stone like reaching hands. The girl stood frozen behind the vampire king, her breath shallow, the baby pressed against her chest as if her heart could shield him from everything closing in. Three men emerged from the darkness. Their coats were clean, their boots steady, the kind of people who believed rules made them righteous. One of them glanced at the vampire king and laughed softly, unimpressed, unaware. "Step aside," he said. "This doesn't concern you." The vampire king did not move. He did not raise his voice. He simply stood there, calm as the night itself. "It concerns me now." Something in his tone unsettled them. Not anger, not threat, certainty, the kind that does not ask permission. One man shifted his weight, suddenly cautious. Another looked past him, spotting the girl's pale face. "You were told what would happen," he said sharply. "Hand over the child and walk away." Her knees almost gave out. Shame burned hotter than fear. She wanted to scream that she was not heartless, that she had fought until there was nothing left. Instead, she whispered, "Please." The vampire king felt that single word strike deeper than any weapon. He lifted a hand, not in warning but in quiet refusal. "You speak of order," he said, "yet you create suffering and call it necessary." The men scoffed, but unease crept into their eyes. One took a step forward. "You don't understand how this city works." "I understand perfectly," the vampire king replied. "I built parts of it long before you were born." They laughed again, louder this time, but the sound cracked at the edges. The air around them seemed heavier, as if the night itself leaned in to listen. Street lamps flickered, reacting to something they could not see. The baby stirred, letting out a soft cry. That sound changed everything. The vampire king turned slightly, enough for the girl to see his profile. For a brief moment, centuries fell away. There was no ruler, no legend, only a man who remembered being small, helpless, and alone. His voice softened. "It's all right," he murmured, though he wasn't sure if he meant the child or the mother. One of the men lost patience. "Enough," he snapped, reaching out. Before his hand could touch her, the vampire king moved. It was not violent, it was not loud. He simply stepped between them, his presence suddenly undeniable. The ground beneath their feet seemed to hum, a warning without words. The man's arm stopped midair, as if an invisible wall had risen. A fear finally showed on their faces. "You will leave," the vampire king said quietly. "You will forget this address, and you will never threaten a mother with her child again." "You can't control us," one man stammered, though his voice shook. The vampire king met his eyes. "I already am." Silence stretched. Then, one by one, they backed away, pride collapsing under something they could not name. When they disappeared into the darkness, the street felt strangely empty, like a storm had passed without rain. The girl slid down against the wall, shaking. Tears soaked into the baby's blanket as relief and terror tangled together. "Why?" she whispered. "Why help me?" The vampire king knelt in front of her, lowering himself to her level, an act no one alive had seen in generations. "Because power that does not protect is nothing," he said, "and because tonight you reminded me of that." She looked at him, hope and disbelief battling in her eyes. "They'll come back," she said. "They always do." He did not deny it. "Then you won't stay here." Her breath caught. "I have nowhere else." For the first time, uncertainty touched his face. He had castles, armies, wealth beyond measure, but bringing a human woman and her child into his world would shatter ancient laws. It would invite danger he had kept away for centuries. Yet as the baby reached out and wrapped tiny fingers around his own, the decision was no longer his alone. He gently closed his hand around that small grip, feeling something warm and fragile anchor itself to him. "Oh, come with me," he said. The girl stared at him, the weight of the unknown pressing down on her. To follow him meant safety or a different kind of risk entirely. Behind them, high above the city, unseen eyes were already watching. And as she rose to her feet, stepping toward the Vampire King, neither of them knew whether this choice would save them both or awaken a danger far greater than anything they had just escaped. They did not walk far, yet every step felt like crossing into another life. The city thinned as they moved, streets giving way to older stone, quieter paths where the noise of humanity slowly faded. The girl kept close to the Vampire King, her senses sharp, her fear changing shape but never leaving. The baby slept again, unaware that the world around him was being rewritten. She wanted to ask where they were going. She wanted to ask who he truly was, but some truths announced themselves without words. The way the air shifted around him, the way shadows seemed to lean inward, respectful, almost protective. She understood enough to stay silent. They stopped before a gate hidden behind ivy and thyme. Ancient iron, untouched by rust, curved like something grown rather than built. The Vampire King placed his hand against it, and the gate opened without a sound. Inside, the world felt different, warmer, still. A courtyard stretched out beneath a pale sky lit by soft lanterns that glowed without flame. Stone walls rose high, holding centuries within them. This was not a prison, it was a sanctuary. Her breath trembled. "I can't stay in a place like this," she said quietly. "I don't belong here." "You belong where you are safe," he replied. "Everything else can be learned." Servants appeared silently, their movements careful, their eyes curious but kind. No one stared at the child with suspicion. No one reached to take him away. Warm blankets were offered, water, food. The girl hesitated, then accepted, hunger reminding her she was still human. As she ate, exhaustion finally caught up to her. Her hands shook, her eyes refused to stay open. The Vampire King watched from a distance, guarding her rest without hovering. When the baby whimpered, he was the one who rose, surprising even himself as he gently rocked the child back to sleep. Something ancient inside him shifted. Later, in a quiet chamber, he placed the baby in a cradle carved with symbols older than language. The girl stiffened. "Is it safe?" she asked. "It has protected princes," he said. "It will protect your son." The word son caught in her throat. She nodded, trusting him in a way that frightened her more than fear ever had. Night deepened, silence settled, and yet the Vampire King did not sleep. In the highest tower, voices gathered. Elders, watchers, those bound by laws written in blood and shadow, they had felt the disturbance. A human within the walls, a child, a weakness. "You break balance," one voice hissed. "You invite ruin." He stood before them, calm, unbowed. "I correct it." "Humans bring chaos," another warned. "Attachment makes kings fall." His gaze hardened. "Then let me fall for something worthy." Murmurs spread, sharp and dangerous. This was not rebellion, but it was close. The elders withdrew without verdict, leaving threats hanging like fog. Down below, the girl woke from uneasy sleep, heart racing. She did not know why, only that something was wrong. She rose and moved through the unfamiliar halls until she found the courtyard. The Vampire King stood there, alone, staring at the sky as if weighing centuries against a single night. "They don't want us here," she said softly. He turned, surprised she had found him. "No," he admitted, "they do not." She hugged herself, shame creeping back in. "Then I should leave before I cause trouble." He stepped closer, his voice steady but heavy. "You are not the trouble." A distant bell sounded, low, ominous, a warning meant only for those who understood it. The Vampire King's eyes darkened. but staying may cost more than you realize. She looked back toward where her baby slept, toward the fragile future she dared to hope for. Leaving meant survival without dignity. Staying meant protection wrapped in danger. Above them, the bell rang again. And as the walls of the sanctuary seemed to tighten around them, both understood the truth they could no longer escape. The child had been noticed the bell's echo faded, but its meaning lingered like a wound left open. The girl stood very still, listening to the silence that followed, the kind that comes before something breaks. She had lived her life reading danger in small signs. This one was unmistakable. "What does that bell mean?" she asked. The Vampire King did not answer at first. His eyes remained fixed on the dark sky as if he were listening to something far beyond human hearing. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm but weighted. "It means the council is divided, and division makes people reckless." She felt her stomach tighten. "About us." "About the child," he said honestly, "about what he represents." She wrapped her arms around herself, instinctively turning inward. "He's just a baby." "Yes," the Vampire King replied, "and that is exactly why he matters." They returned inside together. The corridors felt longer now, the walls less comforting. Whispers moved through the stone, not literal voices, but a sense of attention, eyes watching from behind history itself. In the chamber where her son slept, she paused at the doorway. The baby lay peacefully, chest rising and falling, unaware of the invisible lines being drawn around him. Her heart ached with a familiar fear. Everything she loved had always come with conditions. The Vampire King stood beside her. "No one will touch him," he said. She believed he meant it. That did not make her feel safer. "You said laws would be broken if we stayed," she said quietly. "What happens to you if they decide we are too dangerous?" A faint smile touched his lips, humorless and tired. "They will remind me that kings are replaceable." The words struck harder than any threat. She looked at him differently then, not as a legend, but as someone who stood to lose everything. Before she could respond, the door opened. A woman entered, tall and composed, her presence sharp with authority. Her eyes lingered on the child longer than politeness allowed. "You have brought the outside in," the woman said, "and now it breathes within our walls." The Vampire King did not bow. "This is Lady Surith," he said to the girl. "She speaks for those who fear change." Surith's gaze shifted to the girl, assessing cold. "Fear is not without reason," she said. "Human children grow, they ask questions, they love, all things that weaken immortal resolve." The girl felt small under that gaze, but she did not step back. "I only want my son to live," she said. "I will take him and leave if that keeps him safe." Surith raised an eyebrow. "Will you, when you have tasted protection, when the world outside no longer scares you?" The silence stretched. The Vampire King's voice cut through it. "You will not test her like this." Surith turned to him. "You already are by keeping them." She stepped closer to the cradle and the air changed. The baby stirred, sensing tension beyond understanding. The Vampire King moved instantly, placing himself between Surith and the child. His calm finally cracked, revealing something older and sharper beneath. "Enough." For a moment, no one breathed. Surith studied him, then nodded slowly. "Very well, if the child stays, he will be judged." The girl's heart skipped. "Judged how?" "By our laws," Surith replied. "At the next moon, we will decide whether he is a threat or an exception." "And if you decide he is a threat?" the girl asked, her voice barely steady. Surith did not answer. She turned and left, her footsteps echoing like a verdict already written. The girl's knees gave way. The Vampire King caught her before she fell, steadying her with surprising gentleness. "I will not let them harm him," he said. Tears slid down her face, quiet and unstoppable. "You don't know them like I do," she whispered. "Systems always find a way to take what they want." He held her gaze. "Then I will stand in their way." The baby cried softly, a small sound filled with need. She reached for him, pressing her forehead to his tiny one, as if memorizing him in case the future demanded something unbearable. Outside, the moon began to rise, thin and watchful. And somewhere deep within the fortress, ancient laws shifted, preparing to test whether love could survive power or be crushed by it. The days that followed moved slowly, as if time itself was uncertain what to do with them. The fortress remained calm on the surface, but beneath it, tension threaded through every corridor. The girl felt it in the way servants spoke more softly and how doors closed a little faster when she passed. She was no longer invisible. She was a question no one wanted to ask out loud. The Vampire King visited often, never announcing himself. Sometimes he brought food. Sometimes he brought silence, standing by the window while she rocked her son, both of them listening to the wind move through the stone. In those quiet moments, she almost forgot the judgment waiting at the next moon. Almost. One evening, as the sky darkened, she finally spoke the fear she had been carrying alone. "If they force you to choose," she said, not looking at him, "between your throne and my child, what will you do?" The question hung between them, fragile and dangerous. The Vampire King did not answer immediately. He crossed the room and knelt beside the cradle, resting his hand near the baby, careful not to wake him. "I have protected this realm for centuries," he said slowly. "I believed sacrifice was always supposed to be someone else's burden." She watched his face, seeing something shift behind his eyes. "But not this time," he continued. "This time the cost is personal." The baby reached out in his sleep, fingers brushing the Vampire King's skin. He did not pull away. The night before the judgment, the fortress prepared without ceremony. No banners, no music, only watchful silence. The girl could not sleep. She walked the halls until her feet ached, holding her son close, memorizing the feel of his weight, his warmth. Just before dawn, the Vampire King found her in the courtyard. "There is something you must know," he said. Her heart tightened. "Tell me." "There are those who will argue the child should be taken from you," he said carefully. "Raised here, shaped, they will call it mercy." Her breath broke. "Over my dead body." A flicker of respect crossed his face. "I expected nothing less." He led her to a hidden chamber beneath the fortress, its walls etched with symbols of protection and truth. "If the judgment turns against us," he said, "this place will hide you. It will keep you safe long enough to escape." She shook her head, anger cutting through fear. "You're planning for me to run." "I am planning for you to live." "And you?" she asked. He did not answer. The moon rose full and unforgiving, flooding the great hall with pale light. Elders gathered, their faces carved from centuries of certainty. Surith stood among them, unreadable. The girl stepped forward when summoned, her son cradled in her arms. Her legs trembled, but she did not bow. They spoke of balance, of danger, of precedent, words piled up like stones meant to bury something alive. Finally, Surith addressed the Vampire King. "You have grown attached," she said. "Attachment clouds judgment. Step aside and the child will be spared suffering." The Vampire King moved forward instead. "He will not be taken." A murmur spread, sharp and disapproving. "You would risk everything for a human child?" an elder asked. He looked at the girl, then at the baby, then back at the council. "For innocence," he said, "yes." The girl's chest tightened, hope and terror colliding. Surith's voice dropped. "Then make your choice, your crown or them." The hall fell silent. The Vampire King closed his eyes for a brief moment, as if listening to something only he could hear. When he opened them, his gaze was clear. "I choose them." Gasps rippled through the chamber. In that instant, the ground trembled, not from magic, but from shock. Ancient laws reacted to a broken oath. Power shifted, unstable and alive. The girl clutched her son, heart racing as the consequences began to unfold. Because by choosing her and the child, the Vampire King had just set something irreversible in motion. And whatever came next would either save them all or destroy the kingdom he had spent centuries protecting. The tremor settled, but the silence that followed felt heavier than stone. The elder stared at the vampire king as if seeing him for the first time, stripped of title and myth, standing only as a choice he could never take back. Surith broke the quiet. "Then you are no longer bound by our protection," she said, "nor are they." The girl's heart pounded. She held her son close, ready to run, ready to fight with nothing but love if she had to. The vampire king stepped in front of her without hesitation, his back straight, his voice steady. "I ask for no protection," he said, "only truth." Oh, the air shifted. The symbols carved into the hall began to glow, reacting not to power but to intent. The elders exchanged uneasy looks. This was old magic, older than fear, older than rules. Magic that could not be forced. "Bring the child forward," one elder said quietly. The girl's instinct screamed no, but she felt the vampire king's presence beside her, unwavering. Slowly, she stepped forward. The baby stirred, eyes opening, calm and curious, untouched by the tension that had shaken kings. But when the light reached him, it softened. No alarms, no darkness, only warmth. A hush fell over the hall. "He carries no threat," another elder whispered, "only resilience." Surith's composure finally cracked. "That proves nothing," she said. "Humans chain." "So do we," the vampire king replied, "if we allow it." The light faded, leaving behind a truth no one could deny. The child had not broken their laws, he had exposed their fear. The elders withdrew to confer, their voices low and uncertain. Minutes stretched like hours. The girl's legs trembled, but she did not fall. She had already lost too much to collapse now. At last they returned. "The child may stay," Surith announced, her voice controlled but altered. "With his mother, under protection, not as an exception but as a beginning." Relief hit the girl so hard she nearly cried out. She sank to her knees, clutching her son, tears finally free. The vampire king closed his eyes, a quiet breath leaving him, centuries of solitude lifting just enough to let something new in. "You will no longer rule as before," an elder warned him. "This choice has changed you." Oh, he nodded. "Good." The fortress did not fall, it did not burn, instead it adapted, slowly, uneasily, but it adapted. Days turned into seasons. The girl found work within the walls, not as a guest, but as someone who belonged. Laughter returned to places long ruled by silence. The child grew, surrounded by guardians who learned, one by one, that strength did not weaken when it protected the vulnerable. And the vampire king changed. He still ruled, but differently. He listened. He walked among his people. He knelt when needed. Power no longer sat above him like a crown. It moved through him like purpose. One evening, as the sun dipped low and the child laughed in the courtyard, the girl stood beside him. "You lost everything for us," she said softly. He watched the child run, light spilling across ancient stone. "No," he replied. "I finally found what I was missing." The world beyond the walls did not become kinder overnight, but inside them something rare had taken root, proof that even immortal hearts could learn humility, that courage could look like mercy, that love once chosen could rewrite fate. And in a kingdom built on shadows, a child once forced to be abandoned became the reason the darkness learned how to soften. The end was not an ending at all. It was a promise.